Welcome back to our review of the 49 processes of project management as documented in the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. In our previous sessions, we covered initiating and planning. And now we're moving on to the executing process group. The executing process group can be described as one of the most dangerous process groups in the entire PMBOK Guide. You know why? It's only got 10 processes in it, but it carries 31% of the PMP exam. That's scary. 10 processes out of 49, that's almost like saying 20%. 20% of the processes in the 10 over 50, that's 1/5. That's like 20%. Yeah. 20% accounts for 31%. Wow. It's big. So those 10 processes that you find in executing account for 31%, but think about it. The 2 that we talked about in initiating account for 13%. That's even scarier. So initiating and executing, we need to be really careful with these process groups, because that means 12 processes account for 44% of the exam. Oh my goodness. That's scary. Because if you look at the entire landscape of what you've got on page 25, there are 49 processes. So you'd have thought that one process would carry roughly 2 marks, but not the case. Some processes are more lethal than others, like develop project charter, like identify stakeholders. And we've talked about a laundry list of things in planning. They don't carry that many marks. But when it gets to executing, look out. It's scary. It's scary, I tell you. 10 processes account for 31%. So in executing, we're going to get done pretty quick. But I'd like you to remember that the real PMP exam is going to have a lot of situational questions. And these situational questions typically have to do with either executing or monitoring and controlling. It's not about the planning, per se. It's more about the executing and the monitoring and controlling. So we need to be careful with these 10 processes that I'm about to show you. Okay? So welcome to executing, the executing process group, the notorious executing process group. I'd just like to remind you that we've got the PMP exam virtual prep camp coming up. And let's say you're watching this months after we've held this webinar. You could still check into pmsucceed.com because you may be able to grab, training at that point down the road. But in August, we've got some sessions coming up. Okay, so go to pmsucceed.com, check that out. But let's talk about our first process of executing. It's called direct and manage project work. Our mission here is to execute the work in the project management plan. Now, someone may ask the question and say, what do we really get out of this process? It's just directing the work. There are some very important outputs from this process. And the most important one that I'd like to call your attention to is called deliverables. But without deliverables, your project wouldn't end. Your project wouldn't produce what the stakeholders are looking for, right? So direct and manage project work produces deliverables. Very important process. The next process, which is also in the integration management knowledge area, like direct and manage project work, is called manage project knowledge. And in this process, we're using existing knowledge, creating knowledge, sharing opportunities or forums, and we're creating new knowledge to accomplish the project objectives while contributing to organizational learning. You want to look out for the two types of knowledge explained here, the tacit knowledge and the explicit knowledge. Look out for those. Next process within the executing process group is called manage quality. And manage quality is where we assure our stakeholders that the work is going according to plan, that things are going as planned. And we call it manage quality. It sounds very bland, but it is a deep process. We've got quite a lot of tools and techniques to be aware of in this one. If nothing else, do remember, Design for X is here. You know, think about that. Problem solving, think about those. So we've got some important ITTOs in this process. Moving on to our next one here, it's called acquire team. Acquire team deals with acquiring the team, the humans working on the project. This is where we select project team members. The next process is develop team. This is where we build a team through training, coaching, team building, and great interpersonal skills. This is a loaded one. Definitely slow down and know all the intricacies when it comes to developing the team through training and team building, so on and so forth. The next process on the list, I told you they were quick, is manage team. And our mission here is to lead and guide the team to project success. We're dealing with humans here. We're giving them feedback. We're trying to effectively lead and guide the team. The next process here is manage communications. And in managed communications, we are communicating with stakeholders and team members by sending out reports and other means of communication. We talked about this a few minutes ago, and I said this is where you are actually communicating. This is where you may need to take a trip to communicate. Remember the 55-38-7. The next process here is implement risk responses. So this is where we take our risk response plans and we implement those plans. Now when I say risk response plans, typically that would exist in your risk register. So there's no standalone per se risk response plan. That was talked about in a previous edition of the risk guide from the PMI, the risk standard. But when you really boil it down, there's no risk response plan separate from the risk register. Your risk response plans live in the risk register. Okay, so just keep that in mind. But anyway, it's in this process that we carry out our risk responses. Next process here is conduct procurements. Quite straightforward. It's all about selecting sellers through a formal process. After you select sellers, of course, you'll award a contract, there will be agreements, and the subcontractor, we call them in some firms, or vendor, we call them. Some people prefer saying vendor or partner, whatever you call them. This is where that contract will be awarded. And once the contract is awarded, it's off to the races. All right, let's move on. We've got one more here, and this is called manage stakeholder engagement. And this is where we're managing our stakeholders' engagement. No, it didn't say we're managing our stakeholders. We are managing our stakeholders' engagement as previously planned. Why are we managing our stakeholders' engagement, and how are we doing that? Well, we are communicating with our stakeholders intentionally with a purpose to engage them. We're still communicating, but it's with an intent to engage, and we're doing all sorts of other things. This is one I often say, hey, let's take a read. So let's open up your favorite book, PMBOK Guide, to chapter 13. Let's take a look. This is 13. Point 3. So I like reading what the PMI have to say about the processes at a high level. This is on page 523. And this states, managed stakeholder engagement is the process of communicating and working with stakeholders. It said communicating, but wait, we're in stakeholder management. Why did it do that? Like I said, you're communicating with an intent to engage. So let's read. It says, managed stakeholder engagement is the process of communicating and working with stakeholders to meet their needs and expectations, address issues, and foster appropriate stakeholder involvement. The key benefit of this process is that it allows the project manager to increase support and minimize resistance from stakeholders. This process is performed throughout the project. There you go. So, we are communicating, but we are communicating with an intent to engage our stakeholders and do all those things. Get their buy-in, get them more committed to the project, resolve issues, so on and so forth. Okay? So that is managed stakeholder engagement. And with that, we have come to the end of all the processes in this area. Again, don't forget to hit pmsucceed.com. You got any questions, you know what to do. You can either type them in here live, or you could send an email. Okay? So thank you very much for joining me for that third session on executing. We shall have 2 more sessions, one on monitoring and controlling and one on closing. So you can see the bulk of the volume is from planning. Planning is the beast. We spent about 40 minutes trying to cover planning at a high level. We got to executing and boom, we were done just like that. But on the exam, it's the reverse. When it comes to the marks, executing is where all the marks are. So, even though a lot of them are short and sweet, you got to pay attention because they have unique ITTOs that could make or break your exam. I refer to executing and initiating and closing, as you'll see, as low-hanging fruit. Because if you get those ones really, really good, you're going to get 31% in executing, plus 13 in initiating, plus 7 in closing. Wow, that is over half of the exam. You see how it all adds up? See? So pay attention to these little things. I've been dropping this gold I've been trying to give you. Take the gold. Go do something with it on your exam. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you in the next session. Bye for now.